Great. Well, we're doing lean user testing in here today. That's not what you're here for. Well, stay anyway because it's going to be fun. Yeah, hopefully everyone's feeling a little bit active to this morning because we're going to do a little bit of an interactive thing. And it's the first time I've tried this, so we'll see how it goes. You know, live. They say never do live demos. This is like an even more chaotic version of that because it involves a couple participants at least. So hopefully you're feeling some energy. My name's Alec. I run a little shop called Tandem here in the Bay Area. I do a lot of things. I've been somebody that runs agencies for a long time. Long time, about 6 years now. Primarily in the Drupal world, but also doing other things like Laravel and WordPress. And also getting into this weird world of architecting projects, figuring out the why behind things. We like to say that why is the most important question. And as somebody that comes from a development background, it's been a while since I came around to that realization. But the moment I did, that's really when my organization and the people I work with, my clients, my team members, we all got very energized around our projects and we started being a lot more successful. And we started asking why and caring about that more than, hey, let's do some really cool Drupal stuff. So I have some goals for this presentation, but I'm actually more concerned about what goals you guys have, what you want to get out of this, because that's really what I want to achieve. So, anybody, why did you decide to come up here and find this weird room that has like a partial bay view, I suppose? Just popcorn, anyone?
For me, this is an area where our user testing is really informal and off the cuff.
Okay.
We're new to Drupal in the last year, and on our old platform, we do front-end development, so we're also new to server-side development as well. We're new really just this year to the whole process, and this is probably the least formalized area for us.
Okay, interesting.
And so I'm here looking for an efficient way to bring user testing in so that the client doesn't get scared by a big expense.
Yeah.
But we still get some real-world feedback.
Nice. Okay. Anyone else?
Just tips and tools that you use would be interesting.
Nice. Okay. Those are all in line. I would say so that really is the exact reason I'm giving this talk, is that I've had several clients now who were very intimidated by the idea of doing user testing. It just was something that was not even on their map. And when if they thought about it, they thought it was this complex, expensive thing that they would need to hire an expensive consultant for. And I'll admit, I was intimidated too. Like I said, I come from a development background. I don't consider myself to be a designer, although now I do, because design is just everything that we do. It depends on what you want to call design. And everything we're doing here today is definitely design in my mind. So yeah, introducing those ideas to our clients in a way that's very palatable. Definitely talking about a few tools that I've found helpful, and hopefully we can share a few others. How many people have done user testing in the past? Okay, awesome. So we are all practitioners, and we can all share our experience here. That's great. Yeah, so definitely going to be talking about a few tools I've used, and I'm sure we're going to get some more things thrown up as well. And then making things more formalized. Everything in my business, at least, and I'm hopefully in your organizations as well, is about codifying things either in process or automation in code, in my mind. If we're not doing that, we're going to be doing different things every time. And that applies even to design, where we are doing extremely creative boutique things oftentimes. Yeah, there's always going to be that 10% that we can't replicate that's going to be different between project to project. But that should be growing smaller and smaller every project we do if we're successfully codifying our knowledge into requisite documentation, into training our team so other people besides us know how to do this stuff. Everything should be becoming more efficient, more reproducible. That's really what my organization Tandem is about, and I think any professional organization really should be about as well. So my goals, anyone should be able to do user testing. Doesn't matter if you're somebody that's intimidated by it from a client perspective, if you're a developer that's getting into the idea of figuring out what users want instead of just solving technical problems. We should be encouraging participation from all stakeholders on the team. What some of the best experiences I've had, getting somebody that might be more on the back end of things, just showing them a user testing video, right? Like the eyes light up. Wow, the people that I thought formerly were just bugs and abstract error reports are people now. And they have problems, and they're feeling pain. And I need to solve that for them. Like that gives you a reason to actually care and a reason to do things instead of just abstractly like solving tickets, checking off boxes and tasks. So lean, I find I'm a little hesitant to even use that word. How many people feel comfortable, like you feel like you know what lean is and you would be confident saying, yes, I practice like, lean design or lean user experience or, like I don't feel comfortable with it. I'm raising my hand because I just put it on my presentation. And I think it's just overloaded. It's a buzzword at this point. The thing I think is useful about it is the idea that we should be concentrating on user value above pretty much anything else. And I think that's when I think about the lean design process and applying that to user testing, that's the thing I get out of it. We want to be wasting as little time as possible to build the right thing instead of building first, asking questions later. And that's really the approach that I've seen most of the clients I've started working with. Is this, how many people would you say your organization right now, you go into things, you just have an idea and then you build it? I definitely have worked with folks that, it's good to have a couple
We're a
hands.
university, so we don't do any user testing.
Yeah, and that's...
We just build it and expect people already to use it.
And that's actually the organizations that really I think are that has been most helped by this topic that I've worked with. Universities, large nonprofits, people where they're almost like infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like people, it's like you have to use the permanent site because that's the resource.
Yeah.
But it's still, we have stakeholders and their opinions matter in like one way or another. And this might be, how many people can actually read that? This is where my accessibility, unfortunately, is not great. This is an example of of a workflow that I had with a client where they decided they needed this new web page on their application. And their old process was they would just hold this meeting with their IT department, not really even necessarily going outside of that, think of a bunch of features they needed, build them, not talking to anyone else, test them out, maybe just going through internally in the IT department, maybe with a couple extra people outside of there, but not any users, no end users involved. And then they deploy them. And then a few months later, people would be like, well, this isn't working very well, and we do this whole process again. That is not lean. It looks simple. It looks very simple, but that is definitely not what we really mean by lean. We're spending months of work and that whole process there and not getting any feedback till the very, very end. Some of the fundamental issues I've noticed with this too is just you have lack of stakeholder buy-in. There's no focus on any high-level goals, any metrics that we might be able to collect. And I'm somebody, working with smaller clients, anecdotal evidence, qualitative evidence, right, is oftentimes the best thing we have to go off of. It can be harder to find quantitative evidence for a lot of the things we want to test. But there's always something. As long as we're formulating our questions and the problems that we want to solve well enough, there should be something. It's a solid metric. So our goal in the whole lean discovery process should be to make smaller movements and be able to test those iteratively. This whole measure twice, make small cuts approach. You know what? Kevin's be mad at me. Then record this. I like to think of that whole process, this whole process, as the scientific method writ large across our web projects. So we're defining different problems that our users have, and we have a whole tool set to do that. This is actually probably a good time. It sounds like a lot of you are practitioners and are familiar with a lot of basic tools in UX and design and all these other, and kind of the discovery process is what I call it. How many people have worked with like personas, per se? Okay, good. That's most folks. So we'll slide over that. How many folks have ran, has anyone done a sketching session as an interface design session? Nice, okay. A couple folks. Maybe we'll talk a tiny bit about that. Journey mapping. How many people have done a journey map? Okay, so a little less. And user stories, of course. Should have said that along with personas. Nice. Okay. So the general process that we have here, right? We're defining problems and we're outlining our assumptions. And a lot of times those assumptions are going to be codified in our personas, in our user stories, in our journey maps that show how we think our users are using our service or our organization's set of services. Then we're going to be starting to think about what a potential solution could be. And that's when we start getting into prototyping. The sketching sessions can be a great way to get people around thinking, how do we solve these problems? How do we solve these assumptions of problems that we think our users have? And then the subject of this talk really is the almost last phase of testing those assumptions. Is putting those prototypes, putting some of those wireframes in front of different stakeholders and ultimately the end user. So the way I wanted to do this today, and we're going to see how well this works, is I actually wanted to go through the entire user testing process and do this maybe for somebody's site in the audience. If not, we just redid our site, we can use that. But does somebody have a website that they want to try this on? So it could be anything. Literally, I was thinking about doing like the Trump America site, but I figured that the wounds are a little raw on that for some people, so like maybe we shouldn't like go there. Anything at all? Yes.
The Oregon State University extension site.
Ooh, okay. Let's check it out. Let's check it out. Any questions so far? I'm sorry, I'm like running over basically. This is a condensed version of intros I do for a lot of my clients and just condensed knowledge from a lot of other things. So I know it's going a little fast. Any questions? That's good.
Not yet.
Oregon State Extension. That should get it. Nice.
It's really bad.
Good. Good. Oh, I don't judge. I mean, that's just not. That's what. Yeah. I absolve people. Nice. Okay. This is perfect. Yeah, so we're going to go through this whole process and hopefully let me know if things are illegible. I'm going to go out of pre-zone mode now and just flip between different things. Let's see a couple of my stuff. Okay. So one of the most helpful things I find is we need to actually frame the problem that we're going to be solving for this particular. So you're saying, you know, we've looked at this site and what was your name? Amory. So Amory is one of the stakeholders at OSU's Extension Service program, and she says the site's really bad, but we need to actually get a little deeper into that so we can have some sort of problem that we're actually trying to solve, where we can have some measurable results from that. So this is a format I've used before for a couple clients called the problem statement. How many people, anyone ever used a problem statement format before? Nice, okay, so we got maybe like 20% of the room, clear room. So you guys can help out here. So for the Oregon State Extension program, or I'll say the Oregon State Extension program was designed to achieve these goals. So what do you guys do? What are your goals as an organization?
Share Oregon State University's research with Oregonians.
Okay. So you're trying to share research knowledge. And Oregonians, are those just your students, or are those
Everyone in Oregon.
everyone in Oregon? Awesome. Okay, I like it. Liberate knowledge. Yes. Capital L liberal. That's great. So, and you've observed that your website's not meeting those goals. So is there anything specific about the way that's not meeting those goals maybe that we could dig in just really briefly?
People don't come back. They find it by Google.
Okay.
And don't explore it all.
So you look at your Google Analytics and there's return visitors are nilch. I think I made that word up, by the way. I like aren't coming back because that's super measurable. Like that's a something we've noticed as an adverse effect, and that actually I would actually use as our adverse effect. Okay. Do you have any theories on why they aren't coming back, or?
We don't really have a system of suggesting what else they might be interested in.
Okay.
Everything's very siloed.
So maybe like no relevant content's not relevant to the user. Okay. And now, so finally, our goal here, right? We want to actually have a measurable impact of having returning users. We want to see that pie graph on Google Analytics that I'm sure we're all familiar with, say, returning users, from 10% to 50%, say. Do you guys have a specific goal yet?
Not yet, no.
Okay, that's fine. That's yeah.
So I find it interesting that you put why you think the problem is being caused in your problem statement. For us, that's like breaking the golden rule.
I agree. Yeah, and to be honest, like I'm trying to kind of get us, move through these ones as quickly as possible because that's definitely things I would like to encapsulate more in like the personas and the journey. What I'm calling the journey narrative because we're just going to write it out. We're not going to do any mapping. Though I guess we do have that, so we could do a little bit. I think generally that is the best way to do things, right? It's like you want to keep most of your actual hypotheses about why this stuff is happening for later in the process as you start thinking about more about the specifics of your users. And this is more just a way to keep you on the rails, so to speak. There's you can kind of see this is actually an example from one of our clients where we have some theories here, right? But most of our actual ideas about why these problems are happening, we encapsulate in our personas and in our journey mapping. Okay, so now that we kind of have an idea of potentially, what our actual goals are and what we're trying to solve, we now need to actually create a persona. So it sounded like most people were familiar with personas, so I don't want to go too in depth with this. I think one of the productive discussion points here, though, and I'd be interested to hear some other thoughts, there's been a bit of a movement, at least in my time working with personas, from thinking of personas as almost being these demographic buckets into more generic user categories. So back when I first started creating these, is not so long ago, I feel like people would always say, hey, a persona is, actually, my example here is not a bad example. Persona is Sally, and she's a 35 to 50-year-old woman who lives somewhere in a rural area in California, or like a small town California. She's a mom. Very, very specific things really about this person that they definitely impact their experience of our services, but they can kind of mislead us. They give us this picture of a person instantly, and I think there's been a theory, and I agree with this in a great deal, that kind of limits our perspective on their potential problems. That can make us think like, one problem I've had a lot is we'll think of personas that are older people, and we'll assume that they are not digital friendly because a lot of the older people we know maybe have issues with that. And that's been one of the things that oftentimes gets debunked when I've gotten into user testing, at least on anecdotal levels. Like, wow, these people have been dealing with computers for 20, 30 years. They're digital immigrants, but they're super well adapted. So my saying like, oh yeah, we're looking at people 60 to 70, instantly people start thinking of their parents, or maybe they're even their grandparents, right? And that gives them a kind of skewed vision. So instead of that, I think there's been a movement more towards thinking about users in the context of their problems they have. So saying something like, oh yeah, this person is a digital immigrant, they have more of a difficult time, understanding what a hamburger menu is. That can cut across a lot of categories. That does not completely age related per se. Anyway, yeah, I'm actually interested. Does anyone have any comments on that from your experience?
Well, I've been trying to do things more around the task. Like
Yes.
If we're doing, like a big project and we know that doctors come on and they're looking for info sheets.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people that may be like using the site the same as it doesn't have to be doctors, but they know the name of the disorder.
Yeah.
And they want to type it in.
Yeah.
So trying to group all those people together, I don't know. I wanted to know what you thought about doing it kind of on this, like, okay, they know a lot about the symptom, like we're doing this mental health center. They know a lot about the symptom and they just want that most up-to-date information.
Nice.
Like that, is that like...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I like the it's like you could think of maybe for you guys, that would be the analyzers. You have like a persona that's Aaron Analyzer, compared to somebody that's that does it. They haven't been on WebMD. They're not a hypochondriac and they've looked at all the symptoms and the name of the thing. They can't type that in necessarily. They're going to browse around. So maybe that's Barry Browser. So for OSUE, is that your guys? Do you have an easy handle? Okay, OSU. Oh, I like OSUX. You should consider that. My recommendation.
Probably already taken by something.
Damn it. Yeah, that's true. Oh, wow. Yeah, very good. See, yeah, somebody's thinking in the marketing realm there. So the for our persona here, what's our who? And we only have to choose one narrow category of your users. It doesn't have to be too broad. So if you have like a specific category of user you're interested in, trying to get more turn traffic from.
Home gardeners.
Home gardeners. Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Do you have like a master gardeners program that you guys? Oh yeah. Okay. I'm a gardener, so that's I meant that. Okay. So I'm going to do gendered ones because it's hard for me to think of non-gendered names on the fly. But so we'll say Harry Homegrown is going to be our persona. It's a home gardener. And Harry's on your site looking for like master gardening tips, like horticultural studies. That's kind of your what are your theories about Harry and what he's interested in?
He's probably interested in tips for growing a specific kind of plant, like blueberries or blackberries and
Okay. How to grow specific plants. That's interesting. So that's a good, like already we're starting to get some assumptions out here. Harry's not looking for like a permaculture course or something that's really generic. Harry's looking for specific information on specific plants. So we're already starting to orient ourselves a little bit there. Do you have any idea? So do you feel like Harry's going to be somebody that's a digital native, digital immigrant? Do you have any theories about Harry's comfort level with technology?
I guess he's less familiar with technology than average.
And do you actually think that's because he's somebody that didn't grow up with technology, or just because he's a Luddite?
Probably both.
Okay.
Just based on anecdotal.
That sounds like the gardeners I know too. I'm just gonna say he's a bit of a Luddite. Maybe like we could say he doesn't own an up-to-date smartphone. He might own a smartphone, but maybe it's like maybe it's like mine and it's 5 years old. Save the planet, folks. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So we could obviously go on quite a bit with that, and I need to increase the text size quite a bit here. Apologies. Maybe a little too much. Nice. So we could obviously expand this quite a bit, but we're starting to make some assumptions about who Harry is, and this is probably is this fairly familiar? Like, what changes would you make if you were creating this persona right now?
Maybe add a bit of his motivations.
Nice, yeah, and that's a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have user stories that go along with my personas. I don't know if that's something you guys do, but I know we had most people raise their hands on user stories. I just wanted to show the basic format for anyone that's not familiar with that. You know, as a type of user. So for us, that's as maybe we would go as specific as Harry Homegrown. We could also take it up a level and say just as somebody that's looking, you know, as a information browser on OSU. I want to find specific plant information because I want to grow blackberries. You know. And that may seem kind of silly, like it's a restatement of what we're already doing, but that's different than I'm doing, you know, growing blackberries is a lot different than doing a 5th grade paper on blackberries. Those are two types of information. Okay. And Amory, this is probably where I can use your help again. So the next tool that we'll often use to contextualize how these people move through the site in their current format is just having some sort of journey map. And I think we actually should just skip this in the sake of time. I was going to mention, how many folks, does anybody that does journey mapping, do you use any sort of tooling to do that other than just a custom design tool? I've used a couple different services in the past. Google Draw, I mean, or I think they call it just Draw, is actually not a bad thing if you want to do something super, super quick, or if you want one of your clients to work with you on it. I'm actually a big fan of that. There's a lot of professional services that do journey mapping as well. There's Maply, which I don't think I have an example of. This is a super simple journey map from just using Google Draw. This is one format I've used in the past where you just have one actor, actors here on your y-axis, so like maybe an end user here, maybe the support people here, and maybe like some sort of third party here, and you just show how they interact with one another across time on the x-axis. Happy to share more of that information with folks or go through methods on that later. This is a service called UX Pressia, which is completely eligible on here, but they have a nice service for just creating your personas and creating some basic journey mapping around that as well. So it makes some very nice PDFs that don't present well on a screen like this, but they actually have a dark mode, I think, for this very reason. And if we were going to say something like a basic journey map or user journey for us probably would be for like Harry Homegrown, right? You know, Harry goes to a gardening expo, and he's really concerned about his blackberries in his backyard because they're doing very poorly, and the native blackberries, which are super invasive, the invasive blackberries are taking over from his like cultivated thornless blackberries, right, that he wants to grow. And the people at the Home Gardening Expo say, check out OSU. You know, they have an extension program that's all about this. They'll show you how to do commercial blackberry cultivation. So he goes on the site, and then he does a bunch of different actions, which we'd probably want to detail in our journey map as well. And maybe he gets confused right now. We can have theories about how he's getting confused on our current interface, where his journey is going down an alley, and he's getting lost. So at this point, though, this is when I've usually concluded my discovery process. There's more tools that I often use. I'm always collecting metrics and working through analytics with people. I'm sure most folks that are practitioners here, this is one of your core things you do as well. going through Google Analytics, looking at campaign results for emailing, just anything that's available that shows us what users are doing, where they're succeeding, where they're failing, who they are. And that already we could go back and say like, oh, we turned on the demographics results on Google Analytics, which shows us age and location. We found out there's not too many people that are using older phones. Say that was one of our assumptions about Harry. We find out that most of our users are either on a feature phone. Oh, interesting. Like they're on a super basic phone, or they're on a very modern, up-to-date device. We could probably tell that from the browser versions that are surfacing Google Analytics, and we would have to revise our assumptions around Harry potentially from that information. So any information you can get there is great. And then the other tool that I frequently use is just interviews, ideally within end users. And this is almost a prelude to user testing. So a lot of the interview topics I usually cover in user testing as well, before we actually do the hands-on portion of the user testing. But this is a good way to confirm suspicions. More often, you're dealing with proxy stakeholders, people within the organizations who know the users. That can be more useful. And then finally, we actually have to have something to user test. So oftentimes that's going to be a prototype. In our example, right, we're going to be going through and actually doing this on a real site. But I was mentioning sketching sessions. Talk more about that later if you want to chat about that. And in-browser prototypes are my favorite thing. After you've done a few sketches, you've done some wireframes, actually doing something in the browser, say, just using Bootstrap. So you have a clickable interface that can be ported forward into your project. I find that to be the best thing to test with. What fidelity do people start testing with if you've ran testing before?
Static mockup.
Static mockup, yeah. That's the other place, especially if you're design first. We're in many ways right now a development first agency. So for us, it's like, okay, let's get this into code. But if you're more of a design-oriented agency, a static mock-up is what I've used in the past. And a lot of times, do you guys use InVision for that, or?
Just designer makes something in Photoshop and then shares a screenshot of it.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of, like, InVision is what I've used in the past, I know, because you can do clickable, you can take your static mock-up and make that clickable. Great free plan and everything you can check out. So, with no further ado, we've gotten to the point that we're actually talking about user testing now, because we have all these ideas, we have these hypotheses, and we need to test them out. So why aren't we just using usertesting.com? Well, we can. There's no problem doing that. Has anybody used user testing before to just get like generic feedback from folks or use one of their enterprise plans? Okay. So you should check out the service. It's great. You can get feedback from people that are paid testers, which actually can be very helpful for some sites. If you have a very general audience site, that can be super helpful. And for OSU, there actually might be some good, for your essential program, there might be some good feedback you could get from one of those services. There's even free, I forget the name of the user testing service, they have a free extension to that. You can find that afterwards if you guys want to talk about that. That you can use, that will give you free user feedback from random paid testers. The problem is that these are generic testers. They're not your users. They're not going to be hairy homegrown, right? And they also, this does cost money. I believe user testing is about $50 per session. It's not a huge expense for most projects, but it can be enough to raise that eyebrow of whoever writes the checks. And sometimes that can just kill the process. The third reason I really find is I think that doing your own user testing sessions really isn't that hard. And that process of kind of having a more organic touch with your users can be super helpful in just understanding their motivations and not distancing yourself. So the first thing we have to do is actually grab some participants. And we've got to figure out what audience we want. So with Harry Homegrown, right, we're going to be thinking about, okay, how do we find somebody that's interested in this specific master gardening program? Maybe that means going to master gardening program, master gardening groups, meetups, something like that, asking if we can put up an ad and ask for volunteers. There's lots of different ways we can find that persona. Do we have any user data about this person? probably nothing specific in the case of OSU, right? But if we're working on, say, one of my clients is an information portal where we have people log in, well, we have user data. So we could actually reach out to our users, and we know maybe where they live, maybe their names, other details, demographic data that might confirm whether they belong to our persona, our ideal persona concept. And maybe that just challenges our this is another way to validate those assumptions. If we can't find any of those people, we probably were wrong about the persona, and we need to go back. Then finally, a lot of times you're going to have to incentivize people. Unfortunately, that's just reality. Time is money, and you're going to have to figure out, okay, as OSU, that could, for a lot of nonprofits, higher education institutes, that could be a little bit tough. You don't have like a free month of your service to offer to people. Getting gift cards or something like that might be tough, but that's probably going to be the best thing, and that's where you really, if you're going to have to raise the eyebrow of the financial officer, that's where you're going to want to do it. Get some $25 gift cards. Tell people that you'll give them $25 for 30 minutes of their time. You're going to be good. There's other considerations too. It's just like people don't like knowing that maybe your users are super hypersensitive to identity theft or something, and the fact that you just contact them out of the blue, they're going to be like, "Whoa, I use your thing? How do you know that?" And they could be really sensitive to that. So there's a lot of other considerations to think about too in sourcing participants. But for the most part, people are super open to helping us out, particularly when we grease the wheels a bit. And you can usually use a fairly friendly generic reach out to grab those folks. I highly recommend using Calendly to schedule your interviews. You can sync that up. How many people have used Calendly? It's a calendar scheduling app. So you link it up to your calendar, and it shows your availability throughout the following weeks. People get a nice interface where they can just select a meeting with you, basically. And you can put in a video conferencing link, which we'll get into in a second, and all the other stuff. You can ask them for their name and all the other information that you would need for them to run the testing session. Also free. Free plan works great for Calendly. The final thing, send out a reminder, because you're going to have people drop off. And one thing I didn't put in this reminder, this is actually adapted from a real reminder message, but reminding them about this incentive and that they need to complete the testing session. Super handy. The meat of this is designing good questions. And I like to think of this in a couple different sections. First is just introductions, and this for me has always been more or less the same. Although I find it super important to have these explicitly written down and printed out right in front of me so I do not forget during the user testing session. Just thanking them for taking their time, introducing everybody that's going to be on the session, and I recommend you have 2 people at least. One person to lead the questioning and another person to be more an observer and to think about what you're missing and hopefully take a couple of written notes. Not that those are essential, but it can be handy to write down those impressions. And then finally, most importantly, can I record this conversation, which should be a contingency of the user testing session for them, but obviously you need to get that explicit permission. The second area of questioning I usually have is just basic metric and demographic kind of questions to confirm those persona assumptions. So we'd say for Harry, like, okay, maybe what type of phone / browser, desktop OS do you use? What other basic questions could we ask Harry that would confirm his persona? Kind of got the Luddite piece, which is asking about technology, right? Other questions that we could ask Harry just to confirm our basic persona details there. Sure, and actually I think that actually would start, for me that's starting to get into my third section of questioning, which is when we start talking more about interface tasks and running around. So that's the type of thing I really recommend not, we always want to get to the meat of our problem, but we're what people say they want and what they really want and what they really will use are usually two very different things, right? And I think this is the whole problem we're trying to solve with these tools, is getting around that explicit mental block. So I would try to, in interface tasks, to kind of skip forward, I would try to find ways to kind of ask Harry, like, okay, can you find, maybe just start him off at Google. Don't even start him off at the OSU site. Start him off at Google and say, hey, so you're in Oregon, and you want to grow some blackberries. What do you do? He's probably going to start Googling blackberries, a couple different things. Probably he's not going to touch OSU at all. Then maybe we start him off. Maybe we say, okay, so we introduce you to OSU. You know about us through the home gardening program. You're trying to grow those blackberries, right? How are you going to find the blackberry